On the evening of September 5th, 2022, the quiet Leeds neighborhood of Headingley became the scene of a murder that stunned the United Kingdom. Harleen Kaur, a 32-year-old mother of two, was killed on the doorstep of her own home by the man who once promised to protect her, her husband, Satpreet Singh Gandhi. What began as a marriage born of family ties and tradition spiraled into control, jealousy, and violence, culminating in a crime carried out with chilling precision. And while Harleen's life was taken in a single moment, it was the unblinking eye of modern CCTV surveillance that would ensure her killer could not escape justice. For the evidence room, this is the story of Harleen Kaur and the twisted, tragic murderer lurking in the shadows of her own home. In the spring of 2021, Harleen Kaur Satpreet Gandhi arrived in the United Kingdom with her husband, Satpreet Singh Gandhi, carrying with her the same hopes that many young families bring when they move abroad: opportunity, stability, and the chance to build a future. Harleen, just 32 years old, was also a devoted mother and caretaker, raising both her own son and another child from her husband's first marriage to her late sister. Those who knew her described a woman who radiated joy, whose twinkling eyes and mischievous smile could lift any room. She dreamed of becoming a counselor. Harleen always saw herself as someone who could help other women who had suffered abuse. A dream rooted perhaps in her own quiet understanding of pain. But behind the image of a growing family lay a reality far darker. Gandhi, a 37-year-old man who had once presented himself as a grieving widower seeking stability, revealed himself to be controlling and abusive. He hacked into Harleen's phone, tracked her movements, and obsessed over her friendships and independence. Their arranged marriage, forged after the death of Harleen's sister, had become more like a cage, one that Harleen eventually found the strength to walk away from. By early 2022, she had separated from him and begun reclaiming her own life, but the cost was high. Her family in India, seeing the danger, took custody of both children, refusing to let them return to Satpreet's care in the UK. For him, it was the ultimate humiliation, a loss of control over his wife, his children, and the carefully maintained facade of respectability he had tried to uphold. That bitterness would soon curdle into violence. Let's go back to the beginning. It's March 2021, and Harleen and Gandhi arrive in the UK as students, two people starting over in a new country, with a family tethered across oceans. But just a year later, in early 2022, that fragile, hopeful new life had already fractured. Harleen moved into her own flat in Headingley, Leeds. Her relatives in India, alarmed by the breakdown, take custody of the children. What begins as a protective step becomes, in Gandhi's eyes, the final humiliation. Both children, including the one that is not Harleen's, ultimately remain with her family in Pune, thousands of miles away, and whatever restraint he once showed begins to unravel. In the weeks before September 5th, 2022, the escalation becomes painfully visible. Gandhi buys a kitchen knife from the Asda in Kirkstall. CCTV picks him up, loitering outside Harleen's flat on multiple occasions. And in the days leading up to the murder, he composes a letter that reads simply and chillingly, quote, "This is my revenge for the humiliation and disrespect," end quote. On the messaging service WhatsApp, he also tells the family he, quote, "has to take this step." He blames Harleen's parents for siding with their daughter and warning that their choices will, quote, "mess up everything." Language that reads less like a reasoned argument and more like a man rehearsing punishment while losing his grip on reality. On the evening of September 5th, Gandhi takes a taxi to Headingley. Confrontation replaces whatever negotiation might have been left. He accuses Harleen of infidelity, berates her for the children being kept in India, and then, a single fatal movement, stabs her in the chest. She collapses on the doorstep at around 6 o'clock in the evening. The life described by friends and family, the twinkling eyes, the cheeky smile, the plans to train as a counselor. It all tragically ends there. Even after the killing, his messages continue. He texts the family the same cold logic that preceded the attack. He warned them, quote, very clearly, end quote, that if they did not change their decision and send his first child to the UK, they would, quote, have to regret their whole life for this decision, end quote. The timeline is short, brutal, but specific. Purchase, patrol, threat, a single act that extinguished the future. Digital traces turn private fury into a public prosecutable path. What had been domestic grievance becomes, in hours, a homicide. Fortunately, law enforcement was on the chase, and unfortunately for Satpreet Singh Gandhi, CCTV would give them the map guiding towards a swift descent to justice. The role of surveillance in Harleen's case cannot be overstated. 8 days before the murder, CCTV captured Gandhi buying kitchen knives at an Asda in Kirkstall. The footage is haunting as you watch a killer single-handedly pick and purchase the tools he uses to kill. Take a look. Two days before the attack, he appeared again on camera outside her flat on Victoria Road in Headingley, knife in possession, pacing with intent. The footage built a chilling record of premeditation. Not just a crime of passion, but one plotted, practiced, and rehearsed under the gaze of cameras. Check it out. On the evening in question itself, it was the sound of Harleen's screams that first broke the silence and led police to the flat. Another anonymous resident in the building raised the alarm with a 999 call, but by the time police arrived, the violence had already played out. Inside the basement flat, investigators found thick pools of blood across the floor and spatters against the sofa and wall. Yet the room remained otherwise tidy, as though the attack was swift, brutal, and concentrated. Blood trails and stains told the story at large: direct contact, drip, and sudden impact. The wound was singular and decisive. a deep stab to the chest, piercing through the upper left breast. Small defensive cuts across her hands showed she tried to fight him off, but one strike was enough to take her life. The weapon, a 20-centimeter kitchen knife, was later recovered from Gandhi's flat, stained with her blood. And there too, police found the rest of the evidence: a red rucksack lined with blood, handwritten notes that spelled out his desire for revenge, and clothing carrying Harleen's DNA. In the end, Gandhi's own preparation betrayed him. The cameras had tracked his movements, the knife carried the imprint of his violence, and his flat preserved the trail that would seal his guilt. But the final nail in Gandhi's coffin would strike during the police interview process. Remember, it didn't take long for police to close in. One of Gandhi's own relatives tipped them off, forwarding the WhatsApp messages in which he laid out his fury, his intent, and ultimately his confession. After the attack, Gandhi had returned to his flat, as if retreating into the safety of his routine. But even there, the cameras were waiting. Surveillance across the street captured the moment he spotted officers outside. Rather than run, he walked directly towards them and appeared to give himself up. When he was arrested, Gandhi was still wearing clothes stained with Harleen's blood. He carried himself with a strange calm at first, but that mask cracked as the reality of the charge was read out. In custody, his defiance shifted into silence, answering most questions with a flat, no comment. Yet the weight of his own actions eventually broke through. He finally admitted to the killing, though the evidence had already spoken for him. The CCTV, the knife, the blood, and his own violent words sent to family in the hours before and after the attack. His confession, in the end, only confirmed what the cameras and the crime scene had already laid bare. At Leeds Crown Court, the story of Harleen Kaur's murder was laid out in full, and there was little room for dispute. Gandhi entered a guilty plea, and the prosecution made it clear this was not a crime of sudden passion, but one of planning, control, and revenge. The knife purchase, the notes, the surveillance outside her flat, all of it pointed to premeditation. Emma Covington of the Crown Prosecution Service described it as a horrific act that not only took Harleen's life, but robbed two young children of both their parents in one violent stroke. Gandhi's defense team tried to paint his jealousy and mental health struggles as mitigating factors, but they were eclipsed by the sheer weight of evidence that showed this was deliberate. He was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum term of 23 years and 4 months. For Harleen's family, following the proceedings from India, the verdict brought little comfort. Her brother stood in court and described the family as, quote, shattered. He spoke of a woman who had been a mother, a daughter, a sister, and an aunt, before condemning Gandhi in the bluntest terms. What kind of husband would do this? Harleen's parents, though grateful to the police, prosecutors, and community who supported them, were left to grapple with an absence no justice could ever fill. The children, too young to understand, kept asking how their father could do such a thing. The case eventually drew national attention, carrying familiar themes in modern-day domestic crime: coercive control escalating into violence, jealousy curdling into obsession, and the devastating costs of spousal abuse. Gandhi himself called his crime revenge for humiliation and disrespect, but in reality, it was nothing more than an act of domination. What made this case particularly chilling was just how ordinary it appeared until the very end. Gandhi was not some outsider or some stranger. He was a husband, a father, a man with a facade of respectability. Yet underneath, he carried a deep obsession with control and a festering resentment that erupted into violence when Harleen chose her own independence before his. His crime was not just against her, but against the very idea that she could live freely without him. The case leaves behind a broader warning. Domestic abuse rarely begins with violence. It grows in patterns of control, surveillance, and jealousy. Gandhi hacked Harleen's phone, monitored her movements, stalked her flat, all red flags of coercive behavior that escalated unchecked. In that way, her murder was not sudden, but the grim culmination of a cycle of abuse. The CCTV cameras, the forensic science, everything. It all helped secure justice, but could not undo the reality of what had been lost. Harleen's story stands as a reminder of the urgent need to protect those trapped in controlling relationships. It reminds us of the power of modern surveillance and forensic tools to expose the truth, and how society fails to intervene before it is too late. Today, Satpreet Singh Gandhi sits behind bars, stripped of that control he once clung to. Harleen's children remain with their grandparents in India, growing up without their mother and with the shadow of their father's crime. For the family she left behind, there is no forgiveness, no forgetting, only the long echo of grief and a reminder of how quickly jealousy and control can turn lethal.